theme for the event, and that is policy and governance. I am extremely pleased to introduce our next keynote speaker to talk about policy and governance structures to create incentives for quality outcomes at scale. I welcome Dr. Manish Kumar, the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of National Skill Development Corporation, a unique public-private partnership firm promoting skill development by catalyzing creation of quality and for-profit vocational institutions in the country. Prior to joining NSDC, Manish worked for the World Bank as country coordinator and senior institution development economist, water and sanitation programs at New Delhi. He's also worked for the World Bank in the Middle East and North African countries. Manish served in the Indian Administrative Services, occupying various positions in government of Tripura, and was elected as a Mason Fellow by Harvard University for his leadership in empowering tribal women. Manish holds a degree in Bachelor's of Technology in Mining Machinery from IIT Dhanbad and a Master's in Public Administration from Harvard University, USA. He also holds a PhD in Public Policy from the George Washington University in the US. With that, I welcome Dr. Manish Kumar to come online and share his views on policy and governance. Thank you, sir, for being here.
Thank you, Saurav. It's a great pleasure to be present for Charcha. And I think while this lockdown has had its own negative impact, it has actually unlocked our brains in many ways and has enabled us to reflect deeper on many issues that are of importance. And one of the issues of importance is what I am going to talk on. That's policies and governance structure to create incentives for quality outcomes at scale. When we talk of, I think, scale, India, as a country, I think we need to reflect a little more on what our challenges are like, and therefore, what should policy be focusing on. If you look at the income profile of India, you'll find that the lowest income quartile, the lowest income 25% and the first 25% or the lowest 25% of India, they earn monthly income of 26,000 rupee per month. That's what they earn, and lower and less than that. So it's in average about 26,000. That's the highest point, and then other people lower than that. Then in the second quartile, that is between the 25th and the 50th percentile, you would get people whose income is between 26,000 per month to 37,000 per month. So that's the nature of our economy. Now, essentially, when you create any, particularly for the government, when it works and tries to create any governance structure or tries to create incentive structure, the focus is always on the poor, because that's where the need is highest in a way. So I'm going to therefore put up quite a bit of my talk, mostly on this part of the problem. Just for your information, if you look at population of India, which earns 88,000 or above per month, that is the top 10% of India, by the way. So therefore, what it means to be poor and what is it that is the top 10% of India. So that's just for your reference point, so that it makes it easy for us to understand as I talk on what is it that we are focusing on. So first, coming to, I think, the very philosophical approach that we have in terms of skilling, two aspects on which I want to touch. The first is, I think there's a lot of focus from maybe last 10 years or 12 years on productivity-oriented approach towards skilling. I think there is a need to reflect on this a little more deeply. And probably we need to look at human-centric approach. Now, human-centric approach differs from productivity-centric approach in a number of ways. One of the key one is, when we talk of productivity-based approach, that is when we link incentives to employment. Therefore, you'll find a lot of training partners being asked that, okay, you skill somebody and you get him employed because I'm looking at productivity of the employer, and therefore he needs to be on the job. But when you talk of human-centric approach, and that's something on which there are lots of theories, including some of them which actually belongs to Professor Amartya Sen, which talks about human capabilities, and therefore they're thinking on the human-centric approach to skilling is that employment per se may not be important. What is important is, did the capability of that individual to respond to his environment improve or not? So that's the approach you might have to go for. Now, I'm actually asking for this shift, or thinking about and reflecting on this shift for the reason that you would have noticed a lot of people, migrants actually, returning back to their home place. And mostly workers who are in that income bracket, which I was talking of, the lowest, let's say the lowest 50% of India, in terms of income profile. So having gone back to their villages, their problem sets, I think we need to understand from their perspective. And if you look at it from their perspective, a few things which becomes clear, including from various analytics that we have done, is a lot of resistance and reluctance often on the part of labor to be moving, and fear that moving from one city to another can create difficulties in their life. And this was a perfect storm which actually proved how difficult it can really get for people at times. So therefore, I think if you look at a human-centric approach, what's going to happen is we will begin to focus on clusters. And in India, if you look at clusters, if you look at CMI, for example, and they have created clusters, about 100 of them, which is based on consumer sentiments. And that's, again, there is an economic rationale why they have made 100 of them. There could be other ways of thinking about clusters. I think if you begin to reflect on clusters and then create opportunities and skilling environment or skilling opportunities that are cluster oriented, then a lot of movement that occurs would diminish. Now, one of the advantages of this diminished movement would also be that the exploitation of labor that occurs, as we have often found, wages being very low. People actually, keeping a labor only up to a point that he reaches a certain wage level, and the moment he demands more than that, they actually ask him to leave and then take a fresh set of labor, because there's an endless supply of labor. India is a populous country. So I think this advantage which often industry has, but at the cost of labor, this will decline if we are able to balance the flow of labor from these clusters, or rather the rural side of India to urban side of India, and the bigger cities and towns. So this could be an opportunity for that purpose. And I think, therefore, a cluster-based approach to skill development is something on which we need to begin thinking. Now, technology can play a great role in this context, and new opportunities can arise. So just to give an example, recently there were some organizations which have actually initiated what we call telemedicine in rural India. The fact that doctors are not easily available in these areas, and you have a COVID situation where people might fear, they might be sick and they don't know whom to ask. So therefore, this telemedicine is something which has come out uniquely, will create job opportunities of its own. But interestingly, when the delivery of medicines are concerned, then the ideas about can you use drone technology for delivery of medicines to rural India. So therefore, new ways of thinking are emerging. And these new ways of thinking will also lead to new ways of jobs and new ways of skilling. So I guess the cluster-based approach is something we need to focus heavily, and looking at new opportunities that technology will also provide us. Second thing, I think, which if I look at the broader ecosystem, and if I look at its interest, that occurs is the need for the government to be spending more on skill development. Skill development often is debated for whether there should be private investment or public investment. And the normal, I think, belief in the larger circle of economists mostly is that skill is a case of market failure, and therefore there is a reason why government should invest. One of the reasons why it is called market failure is because, let's say, a company will skill a person, and the moment knowledge about his skill and capacity is known to the competitor of that particular agency, it is easier for the competitor to poach him by paying a little higher. and therefore without any cost, he gets a highly skilled person. And therefore there's no incentive for the actual firm or the original firm to be skilling his people more and more. So therefore this creates a market failure in some sense. And the advantage that government has is regardless of where he moves from this firm to that firm, he still contributes to the economy of the country, to the GDP of the country. It's not just limited to the view of the government is not limited to the income or the profit of a particular firm. So therefore, huge reasoning why government should be putting in more money. Government has put in quite a bit of money, but this time would require more because there are two advantages which will occur. One is a productive use of time of many people who have returned perhaps from various parts of India to their respective places. So you enable them to use the time effectively for enriching themselves so that they have greater bargaining power once they are back in the market. And secondly, it's also because as and when the economy is ready, you get much superior people who are available for skilling. And for those who might want to understand that, like for example, PMKVY has been run by the government and is driven both by NSDC as well as by state governments. Is it leading to any positive outcome? And I'm just taking the case of one third of the people whom we skill getting jobs within 3 months. If I just take that analytics also, then what we have found is that for every rupee that the government spends, you end up getting 4 rupee in return. That's the social cost benefit analysis. Out of these 4 rupee, 2 rupees goes to the labor. So the benefit to the labor is 2 rupees, and another 2 rupee goes to the company where the labor ends up working. So therefore 1 rupee of government is able to create 4 rupee differential. That's the multiplying power of skills in a very, very, I would say, it's a very conservative estimate in a way. And therefore, we all know that human development and human capital can actually make huge difference. And this is just a back of the envelope calculation. But if I look at individuals and I look at impact evaluation studies, what skilling has done to people, then every person who has got skilled through us compared to someone who did not get skilled and still got a job. So there's somebody whom we skilled and he ended up with a job, and there's somebody who was not skilled by anybody, but he still got a job. Between them, in average, the differential in pay is 15%. The differential in their wages. So that itself explains how much how much difference can skill make to the wage of an individual. So overall, therefore, government putting in money there makes sense because in terms of social cost benefit analysis is going to make a huge difference. It's also important from that perspective to ensure that the training partners that we have, which we have created over the last 10 years, the good ones among them. And I've always spoken about the top 20, the middle 60, and the bottom 20. So the top 20, I think, are the ones on which the government should focus heavily and ensure that these ones don't collapse because they are in various stages of difficulties simply because the business has gone down. And I think that's across the board, nothing to do only for skills. So I think a time when government has to put in quite a bit of energy there. 2-3 things more quickly, which I will touch on. One is the potential of creating nano entrepreneurs. A lot of people who have returned back to the villages, and therefore can we create a model where we have more of entrepreneurs, nano entrepreneurs, people who might just need investments of 50,000 to 75,000, a kind of model which is based on philanthropy. And this is something which is a proven model. If you look at something that Mr. Bakshi, Subrata Bakshi has done in Odisha. So there are examples there of success. And if you can replicate that at scale, it lead to a lot of benefit to some of the states where migrant workers have returned. Second is Praveen Agarwala was there, and I'm sure he talked about the skill management information system to improve information access about where is the demand, where is the supply. And as the economy reboots, this knowledge will become quite critical. And I think if you are able to do matching using a technological platform, it'll make things much easier for both the demand side as well as the supply side. The labor benefits as well as the firms which are trying to hire them, both of them benefit by getting the best that is available nearest to them. Secondly, reducing information asymmetry is another aspect on which we can use technological platform. I'm talking about counseling, which is very important. A lot of people get into jobs where they might not be interested later, and therefore they don't have enough prior information to make decisions. And it's important that we empower them with enough information, and therefore need for counseling platforms that enable choices for students who are wanting to get into jobs. And last thing I think important because it's evolving very fast is the need for promoting online learning, a new way of, I think, how you deliver skills, particularly the part of it which can be done in classrooms. Instead of focusing on classroom, can we get it on an online platform? So that's another aspect. We have started eSkill India. There are about 300 courses which are free of cost, but we have 15, 16 partners who have put their own courses out there, which are mostly paid courses. There are nearly 4,000 of them, and they're quite good. So therefore, the understanding of these online courses is increasing. I've also received requests from government that can we begin to establish the protocols of how does online skilling work? Because I think one of the difficult part for the government is always that how do you track this? There are people who often misuse systems. We all know that. So effort from the NSDC side would be that how do we create a system that enables confidence within the government that it's not being misused. So learning management systems, learning platforms where you're able to track learning and you're able to assess learning along the journey. And we know that these kind of things already exist. So we are trying to put all of them together. And once we have that, I think a pilot is more or less something which will roll out in another week or so. But in the long term, the idea would be, can we make this a new normal, at least for the part which can be done in classroom? Because it's also going to cost the government much lesser compared to a classroom-based training, which is far much more expensive. So this is where we are heading in general. And these are the few suggestions and thoughts that I had on policies and governance structures that create incentives for quality outcomes at scale. So Saurav, over to you. Thank you so much. And I'm sorry for exceeding my time limit by a bit.
Thank you so much, Dr. Manish. This is just such an incredible address. There's so many different takeaways. I mean, just to call out the top three, that for me was the whole cluster-based approach, and how cluster-based approach, given the diversity in India, is often used even in healthcare, and I think makes sense even in a skilling ecosystem. I love the skill is a reason of market failure, which very well explained, sir. Thank you so much. And I'm sure the audience had a great time listening to what you had to share. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Have a good day.